This episode of TFL Off-Road is all about servicing your trailer, specifically a boat trailer. More specifically, greasing your wheel bearings. That's very important and has to be done every year because you don't want your wheel bearings to be seized on the road. That makes for a really bad day. Here's how to do it. Technically, there are two ways to do this. Some wheel bearings come with a Zerk fitting, which actually is easy to grease. You can just lift a trailer wheel, rotate it while you pump about 4 times. In this case though, I have to hand pack my wheel bearings because in the past I've also used Zerk fittings, but those are very easy to overfill. And when the grease blows out on the road, that also makes for a dangerous situation because not only does it make a mess, but it can also go into the drum brake system on the back seal. That causes you to lose brakes. So I'm gonna hand pack these. And this first step has to do with loosening the bolts so I can take off the wheel, so I can actually get to the wheel bearings and then just simply pack them. Okay, I already chalked the wheel on the other side, so now I can just jack up this side to actually take off the wheels on this side. I'm gonna use jack stands to secure the trailer so it doesn't fall on me. You're probably saying, wait a minute, this seems like a lot of work, but there's one big advantage to actually hand packing your wheel bearings. You actually get to inspect them and see their condition, especially with a boat trailer that goes in and out of water all the time. You want to make sure there is not much rust there, or any rust, or scarring on the spindle, any number of things. If you're just using the Zerk fitting to annually grease your bearings, you actually don't know anything about the wheel bearings inside. We recommend packing your bearings at the end of the season. Here in Colorado near Denver, that probably means around October time frame, because that's also the time when I winterize my boat here and most of the lakes actually freeze. So when time comes in the spring to get your boat back on the water, the bearings are already packed, there's no issue with the bearings, you can just pull up to the trailer and get to the lake. For this job I use this water resistant marine grade grease. It actually even says right here, protects boat trailer bearings. And I use this packing tool to help me pack the bearings, and I'll show you that in a second. This is also a great time to check your brakes. Most older trailers still use drum brakes. A lot of new trailers use drum brakes too, except some of the more high-end ones use disc brakes, but you want to have a little bit of drag where the pads actually inside contact this drum. And this one seems okay. It does have drag. And here's the bearing cap. It needs a little bit of pressure to come off. There's some older grease. Actually, it looks pretty nice. Still looks pink. And then I have to take the cotter pin off. See, this nut needs to be a little bit loose. It's not supposed to be tightened all the way. Here's the cotter pin that secures it in place, and usually these have to be replaced with brand new ones. That's a good idea. So let me get to the wheel bearings here inside and then put it back together. Here goes the nut. It's basically just hand tightened. There's some dark grease inside of that. Right there. That's what we need to clean up and then repack. Okay, now you can move the entire drum out, but make sure you don't lose all of these parts when they come out. So there is a washer, and you also need to know the order they're in. And here's the bearing. Now you need to inspect the bearing on these surfaces. Make sure there's no scarring or just kind of notches in these rollers. This one looks good. I need to clean it up and check it, and then just repack. Now here's the back seal, and the second bearing is on this side. Now you also need to check the spindle itself for scarring, where the surface is, where the bearing touches it, here and here. So let's clean it up. Let's clean it up and check it. That actually looks really good. Can you see that? The surface is pretty shiny. There's no scarring on it, no damage on this lip. It looks good. This is also a good time to examine the brakes. Here are the brake pads. You can see they're fairly worn already. It's been several seasons that I've run this trailer, and of course all these service items, the frequency you do them depends on how much you use your trailer. Here in Colorado I don't have a lot of boating time because we don't have a lot of lakes, so I only go out about 4 weekends a year. And in other parts of the country, maybe you're using your trailer every weekend. So it depends on, or every day even, for work. So it depends on how often you use it, how often you need to service it. I service them once a year. So here's the new grease. It's actually green in color. So using the handy packer, pushing down on it, it actually squeezed out the old grease, if you can see that darker stuff from the top, and you could see it also here. The dark grease is the old one, and the green stuff is fresh and new, so the packer is doing its job. Okay, so I packed the bearings, I cleaned up, I made sure the rear seal, this is a new one I purchased, is back in, tapped it back in, it's flush. I wiped everything down, the drum itself is now clean, and I'll double check that again. I don't want any grease on the inside of the drum. That will prevent the brakes from working. Now I just have to put some grease on the spindle and put everything back together. Oh yeah, I got the spindle nice and greasy. Try not to get it further behind the seal, but that's good. Okay, on the really important part, so I put the bearing back in there, the washer is in. Now I'm putting the castle nut back on, and this is really important. You don't want to over tighten this, otherwise the drum won't spin freely, and you don't want it too loose to where the drum is actually loose on the spindle. So right now I'm doing it hand tight, and I want to test. I want to see a few, at least a couple of revolutions out of the hub when I turn it. Okay, that's actually not bad. I want to put the cotter pin back in to make sure this nut doesn't back out. Okay, now the cotter pin is back in. There it goes. Now, make sure this is clean again. Make sure I can spin the drum. There it goes. Finally, I'm gonna make sure the cap or the dust shield or the dust cap is also clean, and I'm gonna tap it back on. Wheel bearings are packed. Hub is checked. Now I only have to do this 3 more times. Time to put the wheel and tire back on. Here we are. While the trailer or while the wheel is in the air, I'm gonna hand tighten these lug nuts. And then when I put the trailer back on the ground, I'm gonna torque the lug nuts to spec. Then it's important also to recheck the torque on the bolts, on the lug nuts, after you drive for about, I don't know, 20 to 30 to 40 miles. Because whenever you touch these lug nuts, you know, they could loosen on you with temperature. So you need to make sure that the torque specification is just right with a torque wrench. Okay, now I can lower the trailer and tighten them to spec. Here we go, I got my torque wrench and gonna set it to 60 pound-feet. Nice, job done.